St. Bonaventure Catholic Church in Huntington Beach, California presents
Rebuilt and Renewed,
Bringing the Word Home.
Welcome to Rebuilt and Renewed. We continue our journey this ordinary time, and today the Lord invites us to come and to follow Him. The invitation that can change everything in our life if we decide to say yes. But saying yes is hard. Saying yes requires us to leave some of the things of our lives behind to give everything to Jesus. And that can be especially hard as we live our daily lives as ordinary folks. This week, Steve McCarthy, a husband and a young father of 4, shares with us what it looks like to drop his nets and to follow Jesus in his daily life. We're reminded that we don't follow Jesus out of understanding, but out of love.
In the gospel, Jesus calls upon and recruits his first apostles, asking for them to come follow him and his teachings. They change their ways right away, literally dropping their nets to follow Jesus, going from fishermen to fishers of men. Reflecting on our lives and changing to do the will of God is something that we're all called to do every day. And I think every Catholic or God-fearing person at some point really wants to do that. Even those that don't consider themselves quote-unquote very religious can sometimes be inspired at some time or moment in their life to do more and are called to do something for God. Maybe it's to do some kind of volunteer or service work or some kind of donation of their time, talents, or treasure. But the hardest part, I think, is to do it consistently. My wife and I always say that if we're going about our day with God at the forefront of our lives, then our relationship is at its strongest. It's the times we don't have him at the forefront of our lives that our relationship tends to break down, and things like pride, anger, frustration, and hurt become more difficult to ignore and more pronounced. When I met my wife, Valerie, I was definitely love at first sight for me. We both went to St. Mary's College, which is a small Catholic college in San Francisco Bay Area, just outside of Berkeley. Ironically, we went to the same school at the same time, but we never actually met while we were in school. We did share some friends, though, and a few years after we graduated, we met at one of those friends' weddings. I brought a friend to that wedding as a date who had to leave early, so I dropped her off, came back to the wedding, and later spent the rest of the evening talking with my future wife. We knew each other for about 3 months before I proposed. We had a daughter, then 2 years later, we had a son. A little more than 2 years after that, another daughter, and finally 4 years after that, we had our last son. While this certainly seems like a traditional great story, it is far from perfect and filled with what I like to call learning experiences. When you realize that two people who didn't really know each other for very long before they had children and quickly started to keep adding them, it makes for a difficult relationship. Growing a family and really learning to live together was not easy. Valerie and I both say the only reason that we continue to be together has been our mutual faith in God. We struggle together like any other couple to communicate, to understand each other. And like any other couple, we can be hurt by our spouse with words or actions that don't follow the path of Jesus. The second reading from Corinthians starts, "I tell you, brothers and sisters, the time is running out. From now on, let those having wives act as not having them." Now, when I first read this, my first thought's like, sweet, no more arguing, guys' night out. And then the half second of joking subsides, and then really thinking about what it'd be like to act as if I didn't have my wife in my life, then I really want to cry. What would I do without her? How would I do anything? From raising our children to getting through everyday life. It'd be infinitely more difficult and heartbreaking. The loss of not being able to share in my day, those happy moments to share in, the sad moments to have someone to lean on and to support you. It's truly not something I ever want to imagine, and it would literally flip my world upside down. The reading continues. Those weeping as not weeping, those rejoicing as not rejoicing, those using the world as not using it fully. I think it's an upside down world. I think that's what St. Paul wants us to imagine, because what do most of us do when our world has been flipped upside down? What would you do? I can tell you what I do when nothing is going right and my world is turned upside down. I stop and I pray hard, really hard. And I reflect on what God wants me to do next. Reflecting on this reading, I recognize, man, why don't I do this all the time? Stop, pray fervently, and reflect on what Jesus wants me to do next. It's easy when your world is crazy and you just throw up your hands and say, Jesus, take over. I don't know what to do. But it's harder to do this daily. We have a really busy life like a lot of other people. Valerie has a small but growing business, and I work full-time at a big Fortune 500 company. We have 4 kids and all the life events that go along with it, from soccer practices, self-defense classes, helping with homework, religious education classes. We always have some kind of event to be at next, and there's never a dull moment in our family. When you add in the tasks that are part of a daily life that are things that just need to get done, like making dinner or doing dishes or laundry or just cleaning the house, it's easy to allow the day to get away from you. When do I make time for God? It's often difficult to stop, drop everything, and ask God, what do you need me to do, Lord? But that's what we're called to do. Drop our nets and follow Jesus. That's what Jesus' disciples, Simon and Andrew, did. That's what Jonah did. That's what Corinthians is asking us to do. But these were all saints and disciples. Of course they can do that. What about us? What about me? Well, it also makes things a little easier to know that even these great saints and apostles were not perfect either. His disciples denied knowing him. They fell asleep when he asked them to stay awake and pray with him. No one's perfect. We never can be. I'm just trying to be more aware. Spend time every day reflecting. What do you need me to do today, Jesus? Recently, Valerie and I have learned something. That sometimes it's better to be happy than to be right. During those times when the day gets the best of us and we are feeling hurt or angry with each other, we say this to each other. Actually, honestly, usually it's Valerie saying it to me, but it puts things a little more in perspective. Because while we both always want to be right, especially me, we really want more to be happy with each other. But that doesn't happen on our own. That came through stopping, reflecting, and asking God what he wants from us. We need the graces God gives us to forgive so we can be happy together. When we both stop and recognize through prayer, reflection, and asking God what he wants from us consistently, it seems to prevent the arguments and hurt and allows us to focus on not just our love for each other, but God's love working through us. It's also the only way we get past our hurt and can give true meaning to our lives. You might not be able to drop your nets and follow Jesus every moment of your life. But if you start your day asking, what can I do to follow Jesus today? It might make your life a little better in everything you do. How often do you reflect and ask God, what do you need from me today? What's keeping you from dropping your nets and following him?
Jesus calls each one of us to come and to follow him. That'll look different in each one of our lives, but the invitation is always the same. We trust God, knowing that he will call us not into a life of misery, but into a life of joy, hope, and peace. We thank Steve for sharing his witness with us this week, and we hope that it inspires you to reflect more deeply on God's call in your life and what he's calling you to do today. We hope you find these podcasts helpful, and we're looking forward to getting some groups together to reflect on this word in a deeper way so that we can share with each other our own reflections. There are no major building updates this week, but the plans continue to be at the city for their final plan check before we can go to bid. We invite you to keep that in prayer and to ask God to nudge that along for us. Until next time, thanks for listening in to
Rebuilt and renewed.
Bringing the word home.